China and Russia have forced Germany into an economic downfall. Germany was the powerhouse of Europe. Now, its major industries are leaving the homeland for elsewhere. Join us as we take a deep dive into the biggest problem behind the German recession, its industrial exodus, its energy shock, and the rise of the housing crisis. The China exit. Well, Germany was warned multiple times. The biggest economy in the EU had found its biggest export partner in Asia. Like other European nations, it is believed that economic growth will push China into a more politically liberal direction. Now, that didn't happen, did it? If anything, China's geopolitical ties with the US and the West worsened. Regardless, Germany kept a shallow belief. It only saw China as a great economic opportunity. Other than that, whatever China did, it wasn't Germany's business. Over the years, its dependence on the Chinese market grew. In the pre-pandemic world, its exports to China accounted for at least 7% of the total value. This share was bigger than its trade with its European partners. We all know what happened next. The breakout of COVID-19 changed China forever. Its biggest manufacturing sectors were paralyzed, and its economy continues to be in shambles. This is one of the major reasons why the German economy is fumbling. Now, you know globalization can be risky as well. In China, the purchasing power of an individual has decreased drastically. The pandemic brought a devastating wave of unemployment and inflation. The government's forceful shutdown of companies has caused permanent damage. Even the Chinese locals were forced to move their businesses overseas. Of course, that led to a major surge in unemployment. Lower revenues for the businesses also meant that wages wouldn't be adjusted to inflation. Now, you can't expect an average Chinese citizen to buy a Volkswagen. Even their rent isn't affordable. At the same time, something really interesting happened. The COVID-19 break gave Chinese manufacturers a window to boost local production. This means that industrial sectors that relied on imports began to find alternatives. After all, COVID-19 restrictions meant the imports would be limited, or none at all. When China normalized its economy, Germany was hoping for an export rebound. In fact, many economists expected that Chinese citizens would go on a shopping spree. The government had sealed them in their homes. So, why didn't they shop as soon as they were out? Economists exaggerated this shop till you drop desire. This turbulent impact took a toll on the German economy. Its manufacturers saw a huge decline in demand from China. Volkswagen sells more cars in Germany than any car maker. But in the first quarter of 2023, it saw a 15% decline in sales. BASF saw a 29% decline in demand during the same quarter. Overall, Germany's exports to China amounted to 6.2% of the total value, and this number is the lowest since 2016. But if that wasn't enough, China's participation in the war in Ukraine has changed things too. It wasn't a surprise that Beijing gave full diplomatic support to Moscow. Not to mention, its trade war with the US has intensified too. China's hostile diplomacy didn't help with the German cause. After Xi's pro-Russia stance, Berlin had to reconsider its trade ties with the country. The trade-off was simple. If Germany hadn't re-strategized its China policy, it would have risked FDI options. As of now, after years of over-reliance on China, Germany has taken a step back. It is asking its businesses to de-risk strategically. The message is clear. China doesn't align with our foreign policy. Hence, think twice before investing in the economic superpower of Asia. German companies are facing a severe dilemma. Over the years, they have invested in the Chinese manufacturing sector. In fact, companies like BASF have expanded to China because of the German faith in the country. Their operations rely on Chinese imports and labor too. In this scenario, companies can't just go home packing. The shift in Germany's China policy is tainted. Their over-reliance on one market has caused an economic plague that they were warned about. But the war in Ukraine doesn't only bring Chinese trade ties into question. Germany is actually facing a similar over-reliance issue with Russia too. And while Germany can diversify from China, it can't just buy gas overnight. We're, of course, talking about the recent energy crisis in the powerhouse of Europe. So let's get into it, shall we? The energy crisis. Germany is once again the sick man of Europe. The last time the country had this problem, it had a major political shift. The Berlin Wall had fallen, and in the aftermath, unemployment was rampant in the country. This time around, Germany is facing a major industrial exodus. It's not news that the EU majorly relies on energy imports. Despite their issues with Russia, the EU was willing to buy gas from the country. It was convenient and, well, very cheap. The war in Ukraine took that advantage away, though. Germany was hoping that Moscow's reliance on exporting its gas would help the Ukrainian cause. Its European buyers would use the natural gas market as a bargaining chip. But Vladimir Putin didn't budge. However, Germany had to take a stance sooner or later. It took a hard decision to terminate gas ties with Russia. It also didn't help that Russia had cut off the gas supply itself. One of the biggest blows came from the blasting of the Nord Stream pipelines. The iconic Angela Merkel project had created a bad over-reliance on Russia. Economists had noticed the boost in German exports due to low energy costs, but their faith in the EU-Russia economic partnership was flaky. While it was the consolidated EU stance to oppose Russia, Germany ended up in recession. Back home, energy prices soared. Households experienced a major surge in energy inflation. But, most importantly, energy-intensive industries weren't able to afford energy bills. Now, the alternative could have been much simpler. Before Germany passed major green energy bills, it wasn't exactly helpless. It had running coal and nuclear power plants. But the Angela Merkel administration had other plans. As part of its transition strategy, the country had shut down its non-renewable energy plants. In 2011, Germany had decided that it would decommission all nuclear plants by 2022. It achieved that feat in 2023. But at what cost exactly? Well, one major cost of the decision has been the industrial exodus. At the top of the China problem, German industries are being forced to downsize. Automobiles, chemicals, metals, and other furnished goods have been the savior of the German economy. But these industries also relied on cheap Russian gas. And in the blink of an eye, their energy costs soared. The direct consequences of this problem is twofold. Businesses are either leaving the motherland or they're shredding jobs drastically. Even in these tough geopolitical times, businesses are settling in China. We've already talked about how Volkswagen and BASF had to fumble in front of China, but these industries are still choosing to bet on China, and not in their homeland. Many companies seem to do well in their headquarter countries, yet their operations are extremely slow back home. Amid the crisis, Germany is committed to pay 4 billion euros in subsidies. It will shield energy-intensive industries from high production costs, or it would instill an energy price cap for these industries. However, the import of gas seems like an irreparable issue. Germany's new alternative for gas imports was the U.S., and expensive EU partners like Norway, Belgium, and Netherlands, ever since the country's import bill has skyrocketed. While the country is still looking to strike strategic partnerships, the problem seems long-term. Deindustrialization has caused the Scholz administration to take a step back. Now, Germany is realizing that the decision to close non-renewable plants was a mistake. For economists, this realization is coming way too late. At this point, Germany can't go back. Not when it has already kickstarted its green projects. And this is where Germany's reliance on China becomes a problem once again. You see, China might not be interested in buying from the EU powerhouse, but Berlin needs cheap Chinese imports like solar panels to make the big transition. Not to mention, the delay in transition agreements is another problem that the country has to address. However, economists believe that Germany's pressing problem right now isn't just ecology. It is the fact that its housing crisis and labor shortage are two sides of the same coin. Here's how. The housing crisis. By 2035, Germany will have 7 million job vacancies to fill. Another reason why companies want to leave is a classic problem. For years, Germany has suffered through a chronic labor shortage. Its go-to solution is to make immigration policies and hunt for skilled workers in the thousands of applications they receive. But you can't expect immigrants to reroute to Germany if they don't have a roof over their heads. Two problems are plaguing Germany right now. The construction sector isn't interested in building houses anymore, and, well, people aren't interested in buying houses either. What's more, the devaluation of houses has increased the rents too. In these conditions, immigrants can't afford to live in Germany. Previously, it was easy to find a house in the country because loans were cheap. The European Central Bank had low interest rates, so the borrowing cost was much lower. But then, inflation hit the country. Remember when we said energy inflation skyrocketed? Yeah, that problem is one reason why the ECB had to hike interest rates to counter inflation. Suddenly, loans became expensive to borrow. Now the dream of owning a house in the country has become a fantasy. And on top of that, the war in Ukraine has caused deep trouble. You see, before the war, companies would import cheap construction materials. Now, their business is expensive to carry on. Naturally, the prices of houses have soared too. The construction sector doesn't have profitability anymore. This is why Germany, virtually, has a housing shortage for its citizens, and the immigrants it desperately needs in the workforce. Construction businesses aren't interested in building homes that people won't buy, and many have abandoned their construction projects halfway through. The Scholz administration had promised to build 400,000 homes, but so far, it has only delivered a weak number of 250,000. It is expected that in 2024, the number will go down to 200,000. It's jarring how Germany's over-reliance problem has left it to stumble. It's hard to predict when the energy crisis will end, or when China will revive its trade relationship with Germany. But history shows that Berlin knows a thing or two about getting back on its feet. So, are you expecting another economic miracle for Germany? Let us know in the comments below.